Hello. My name is Sarah, and I am the Education Assistant at Dunlop Art Gallery. Welcome to tonight's Artist Talk, Safer Places, Stories from the First Wave. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that RPL Film Theater, our moderator for the evening, Hagere Selam, shimby, Zegeye-Gebrehiwot, filmmakers Kristin Catherwood and Weiye Su, and the lands on which we are virtually gathering tonight are all situated on Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And also connecting with us shortly, Mila Nakaiko is joining us from Chief Dragi's territory, the traditional home of the Yellowknife Dene, and the traditional lands of the North Slave Métis. All right, I'm going to take a moment to introduce our moderator for the evening, Hagere Selam, shimby, Zegeye-Gebrehiwot. So Hagere Selam, shimby, Zegeye-Gebrehiwot is an artist and administrator who currently works and resides between Treaty 1 and Treaty 4 territories. They have received funding from municipal, provincial, and national arts councils, as well as awards from local and transnational arts organizations. Their practice engages with themes of place and its abstraction from a diasporic, queer, and feminist perspective. Currently, they are executive director at the Saskatchewan Film Pool, co-director of WNDX Festival of Moving Image, and guest editor of the forthcoming Art and Wonder publication. Welcome, Shimby.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you so much for all of your behind-the-scenes work in making this possible. It's been a real pleasure watching you orchestrate all of this. Yeah, I would love to just take a moment to introduce our filmmakers present. What a pleasure to be able to spend this next hour and a bit with you all, and also with all of you who are tuning in virtually, or perhaps tuning in after the live broadcast. Thanks for being here. So first we have Milao Nakehk'o, who is a Dene Sulene artist based out of Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. She has a distinguished career as an artist, community leader, and actor, and is recognized for her exemplary work in reviving and teaching moose hide tanning techniques. This work has initiated a resurgence of the practice, shaping a broader community building movement within Canada, #Revolution Moosehide. She's a founding member of Dene Naho. Kristin Catherwood was raised on a century farm and currently lives between Ceylon and Radville, Saskatchewan, in Treaty 4 territory. She holds an MA in folklore from Memorial University and is dedicated to telling the stories of extraordinary people on the prairie landscapes and the folks that have shaped her life. Kristin's writing can be seen on FromTheGap.com, and she previously worked as a social media coordinator on the NFB's The Grasslands Project. Her previous films include Lift, Spur, and Ride. Weiye Su studied cinema at the University of Regina, winning acclaim for his student film Gone, Gone, Gone with the Winds. His credits include My World is No Longer the World I Knew, an official selection of the 2019 Antimatter Media Arts Festival, and Evelyn and I, which references the pioneering NFB director Evelyn Spice Cherry. His practice includes experimental filmmaking and pinhole photography. And actually, Evelyn and I was the first film of yours that I had seen, which played at Gimme Some Truth in Winnipeg in a shorts program from this side of the prairies. So I remember your name from that moment and that work of yours. And after moving here, it's been pretty lovely to see you work in the editing suite from time to time. So I would love to, again, welcome you all here. Like I said, it's really special to share this hour and a bit with you and to discuss your film works, which have some overlapping themes, but also explores them in pretty unique ways based on your identities, geographies, relationships with land and place and family. And I think we're all capable of some pretty special and nuanced conversation. So I think at this point, it would be great if we could hear from each of you, just introducing your works. And why don't we start with Milao?
Hi, it's Mila.
Oh, Mila, I'm so sorry.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Mila Nakehk'o, and I'm excited to be here to talk with everybody here today. I've been really happy and very proud of my short doc, Kita Among the Birch, which I made for the Curve for the NFB at the beginning of the pandemic last year. I had a unique experience to be able to spend some time with my family on the land for 5 weeks and just kind of reconnect and kind of regroup to come back and live back in town and get back into a new type of groove.
Thanks, Mila. Kristin, if you could tell us about your project, that'd be great.
Thanks, Shimby. So my film, In the Garden on the Farm, like Mila, I took place in my sort of homelands, home territories. I went out and stayed with my dad for several weeks at the very beginning of the pandemic when there was kind of that shutdown and we didn't really know what was going on. I went out there to keep him company. And while I was out there, spring was coming in and I was planning for my garden that I grow every year at the farm. And so the film kind of captures that moment of spring just arriving and of getting the garden ready. And in doing so, revisiting a lot of deeply held memories of place that have to do with my mother and grandmothers who gardened before me, who've all passed away like many years ago. And so that time at the farm this past spring with my dad, in the midst of this, worldwide event, was a very deeply personal kind of moment for me. But I think that it reflects maybe what a lot of people were feeling at that time of sort of paring down to the essentials of what's important, what's really important to you, and who's most important to you and what's most important. And so I think this film was really, that moment in time for me personally that I think maybe speaks to a lot of people's experiences of just, sort of feeling into home and what it means.
Thanks, Kristin. And Weiye, if you could tell us a bit about yours.
Yes, so for my the story is about my friends Jerry and Shinies. Their journeys back to Wuhan, and because of the lockdown during the time, they rediscovered a new meaning about home, about family, and then when they come back to Canada, they also find new meaning about home and family as the new immigrants. So because of that, as a friend knowing the stories, I thought, in this at the time, during the first wave, I thought it was really important to tell stories like this, to remind people about home and family. So it's really fortunate that they allow me to share the story and completely trusted me, and it's very nice to be able to share this story with the world. So yeah.
I would also just like to let our audience know that throughout the program, you're welcome to add any questions or comments for us in the comment section. So time gets flattened in a big way in a pandemic, and our relationship to time and place also comes upside down almost. It would be so good to hear about your relationship to time in the production of your shorts. I know that for Mila and Kristin, you kind of name a specific framework for the amount of time you spent with your families. And I'm wondering how you felt about time in this process of making the work in the pandemic, when time almost stretches and takes on a very different meaning.
It was, I think for everybody at the beginning of the pandemic, like, yeah, time was so uncertain, the amount of time we were going to be in a pandemic. And just we were my work was all canceled, and I'm a mother, so my children were out of school, and just trying to find work and also homeschool them and keep them busy, and just deciding to go have a spring camp with my parents was and started to plan for that was really exciting, because we just planned to just be out there for as long as we wanted to. We didn't have a plan of the length of time we were going to spend, so it was just really unique point in history where we could just gear up and go for however long we were able to last out there, and before like our responsibilities in town and with school and stuff like that kind of got us back into to leave camp. And so it was my dad, I was out there with my parents, and my dad was also just like, it's really uncertain time in the world, but it's like, I'm kind of really grateful because you wouldn't have come home for this long. I wouldn't have been able to be out on the land with my grandchildren for this long. And so I'm always going to remember being able to spend this amount of time on the land, like as a family together. So.
Yeah, I can really relate to what Mila said of just being able to, like, time just could take its own course. And I felt, even at the time, I knew that it was a really special time to be having, such a lengthy amount of time just with my dad at my farm, and being able to really watch the season unfold in a way that normally I can't because I'm coming and going. And so at the time, I really was very like aware of that, of how time seemed to be moving more slowly, but I was okay with that, even though it was sort of like, oh my gosh, how long is this going to last? What's happening in the world? And I think, when I think about this film, I just remember how much uncertainty there was at the time, a year ago now. We just had no idea what we were in for. And also, one thing about time that I thought about a lot during that time was I kind of felt like I was going back in time, because I was staying at my family home, like in my childhood bedroom. And so in some ways it felt like I had, gone back in time, and I was revisiting like books, or I found some of my old journals. And again, even with the content of my film of reminiscing about family and really delving into memory. And so in some ways it felt like this gift, in that I got to sort of revisit the past in some ways, and sort of re-examine it and what it meant to me, and sort of how what I wanted to take with me going forward, whatever would be on the other side of the pandemic.
Weiye, in thinking about temporalities of your work and having the intimacy of being able to interview your friends about a very unique transnational experience, I'm wondering what it was like for you to hear them share their stories about the way that they had to leave their homeland to come to their new place of residence, but also with everything unfolding, there being this stillness, even though things are changing so quickly, like the stillness of being in a hotel during quarantine with a new baby, or the stillness of knowing that their friends are looking out for them and helping with all of those behind the scenes connections. I'd love to hear about your experience of witnessing that for your friends and subject matters of your film.
One thing I certainly learned from my personal experience, especially involving in making this story. I found that, at the times, and even if something that we didn't include, even though, we talk about how people kind of like misunderstand what COVID-19 is about and have that really fears. And now time passed, we learn more about it. And, when we, like a lot of things comes and go, but, the beauty of humanity will always there for you. Like you mentioned, the friends helping them, the volunteers, and especially, Jerry, when he arrived at the airport, he see this post sign saying "Welcome home." There's something he truly feel connected. I think for many new immigrants here in Canada, even though we're new here, and like Jerry, he only moved here for 4 years ago, but he able to, able to, find the meaning, about home, because in Chinese culture, we still believe that home is about family. And so family is not necessarily, need to be blood related. So, because of that, he able to find family among his friends, Lisa, who one of the friends who's behind everything to help them. Even mentioned this, Jerry is my brother, and no matter what, I always there to support him and help him. And that's really touched me, is that, it doesn't matter, how scary the virus could be, or how scary whatever, that really scared or threaten our life. We always know that, in life, we we have each other, and that's what really home means to be, not necessarily where it comes from, or where, it's about the moment that you together, create a harmony home together. So yeah.
All right, we're going to watch a clip from Weiye Su's film Jie at this time.
所以家也不光光只存在于有血缘关系的人，同时也存在于就是说周遭一切会一起共同努力、一起共同生活的一些人。咱们加拿大也是一个更大的一个家。
有点感动吧，突然。对，因为我们平常也不太那种把自己内心去表达出来的人，在疫情面前觉得生命的可贵吧。
Oop, I just muted myself by accident when I was going to unmute myself. I wanted to take a moment to turn to Kristin right now. We had a moment before we went live to share our mutual experiences as gardeners. And when we started our discussion just now, you talked about the gardening season and watching things unfold, but also how your ancestral farm is a place you return to year after year to do that work of gardening. I would love to hear you talk about your approach to gardening at this point, now that we're sort of entering this long middle, as we are starting to call it, because your film is almost this snapshot of that moment when everything was uncertain, as you said, and there was this room to kind of return to almost a habitual process for you. You name things like almost a matrilineal experience of relating to and engaging with your mother and your grandmothers who have been doing that kind of gardening work in that place. So I would love to hear a bit about what you think about it for this moment.
Thanks, Shimby. Before I think about it for this moment, I'm just going to give a little backstory on even what was kind of motivating the film when it was in its first initial stages. And the producer, John Montes, and I were talking about what sort of the inspiration for the film was actually thinking about food security, and how at the time, again, like a year ago, we had no idea what was going to happen in the world, like were the supply chains going to break down, like what was going to go on. And, you know, it was in total lockdown at that time. And there was all of this, you know, rhetoric about what's essential and what's not. And for us on the farm, it was like, well, we got to put the crop in no matter what, like for sure, that's essential. And I was thinking even about gardening and how in the past, I mean, you know, when you talk about food security, the garden was your first stop for food. And that was true until very recently, at least in my own family experience. Like that was a lot of your food was produced yourself with your own hands. And my grandmother certainly did that work, and my mom too. And that's changed in recent decades. But I mean, I'll be honest, like I was very anxious at the start of the pandemic, and I was just wondering, like, you know, what if something really bad happens? And knowing that, I mean, I garden every year, but it took on a little bit more seriousness to me, and that I felt like I really want to make sure that I put in like a good big garden. And that was kind of what the film, we eventually decided about, kind of the crux of the film was like, would we get the garden tractor fixed so that I could expand the size of the garden? But throughout the film, we don't really explicitly speak to it, but you see sort of the juxtaposition between the garden, which in my family, and I think in many families, has been a traditionally feminine space. And then the backdrop of the farm, like the large farm equipment going out into the field, it's like out from the immediate domestic area of the farm, where I do my work of actually putting the garden in. So that's certainly kind of interwoven throughout the film. And I was thinking about those things a lot as I was getting ready to plant. And right alongside that, my dad, my brother, my uncle, and cousin who farm, they were getting ready to farm. And that was, these two preparations were happening at the same time. And they're both about food security, the very local, what you produce with your own hands, and then the agricultural, which, you know, goes out into the world and feeds everybody in essence. So that's just to sort of answer your question. I felt I needed to kind of give that little bit of background on what that was actually about in the film. And as for this year, I've ordered my seeds, they've come in. There's some changes going on in my life where I won't be able to be on the farm in the way that I was last year. And so I'm thinking about this year, you know, hopefully my sister, who makes an appearance in the film, and my niece, Ren, who's 18 months old right now. And she put her first seeds in the ground last spring. And so I'm hoping that this year I can kind of help my sister put the garden in and sort of teach her some of those skills so that she can continue on that practice at our farm of the women putting in the garden.
Thanks for that deeper context. It's really special to hear you name that juxtaposition of almost like feminized or masculinized labor, but they're at the core about the same thing, which is food security. I think that insight is pretty key. And on that note, I think it would be a good moment for us to watch a clip from Kristin Catherwood's film In the Garden on the Farm.
Why did Mom grow a garden?
Oh, Mom had gardening in her spirit. In the spring, she'd get a notebook out or a scribbler, and she'd start planning her garden.
I didn't know she did that.
Yeah.
I have a notebook that I plan my garden in too.
You have a notebook? Yeah.
I didn't know Mom did that.
Yeah.
Just one last thing on seeds. I'm thinking about the art practice of Christina Battle, because at this moment there's a really fantastic show up at the Mackenzie called Connecting Through Grasses. But she also has this broader project which is very much about seed saving, titled Seeds Are Meant to Disperse. So yeah, the idea of like seeds, I think, is a whole other RPL film theater discussion for us to have, but I just wanted to name that link. Mila, I think that there's something about seeing all the generations of your family that you allow audiences to witness that is so meaningful. Like I could cry as a diasporic person who has longed for that kind of gathering in one place, but it's not necessarily, wow, I'm actually feeling quite emotional. It's not possible, right? Like when people either have to leave or choose to leave, that kind of gathering either becomes an impossibility or an imaginary. So it was actually quite special for me to witness it, especially because there's so many parts of this pandemic that can really work against the safety that everyone desires in a family, right? Beyond geographic proximity, like there are many people who, even if they have that proximity, are not able to do that kind of gathering safely. But having that little window into your dynamic and seeing all the playing or coming together in different or maybe even sometimes mismatched ways of all the generations was just like so special. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear a bit more about the experience for you as someone in the middle of that, but also very much orchestrating that coming together of the different generations of your family.
Thank you so much for your comments. That's really means a lot. I was actually, like, when I first went to camp, I was posting a lot of stuff on Instagram, and I was getting so much feedback and comments from so many people just in lockdown in apartment buildings, like from around the world. Like I was talking to people like internationally through some of the stuff that I was sharing online, and they were just really encouraging, just like, please keep sharing. Like, it's so nice to see this window into like what you're doing. And so I really felt like I was sharing that with people. And we did keep a lot of people in our prayers. Oh, now I'm getting emotional. We kept a lot of people in our prayers. We did do ceremony while we were out there. There's my dad singing songs, teaching those songs to my children. And it was, it was so special to be able to be out there for so long and just not have a schedule, because I do a lot of land-based work. So I go into camps and I'm sometimes able to bring my children with me, but we have work that we're there to work, and we have a schedule, and there's like meals are at this time, and like we have to go for a hike or we have to do this. And like we were just there for 5 weeks, so we could just kind of like play and hang out and like go get wood and really spend a lot of time. Like my sons both were using a chainsaw, which is like they're teenagers. But we were able to like be out there for a significant amount of time, that we were able to show them how to do things safely, and just get into a really nice rhythm with my children. And that was probably the first time that we were able to do that, when we didn't have where I wasn't working, and we didn't have a schedule to have to come back to town for anything. And it was so nice to have both my parents out there, because my parents are also very busy people. They're on a lot of different boards, and they're always in meetings. They're really involved in our community and our nation. And so it was also just a very unique to be able to have both my parents like out and away from all of their usual obligations, and for them to take a nice long break and be out there together. And I was just really happy to be able to share that. Shimby, for your comments on that, and it's also a very unique experience, like at the time of filming and making it and being at camp. Like, I consciously knew people were alone and isolated in larger centers, and I consciously knew that what we were doing was incredibly special and unique. How the Northwest Territories handled travel was like, the travel restrictions were like very, very secure. And so we haven't had a whole lot of COVID cases up in the north here. So we're able to travel to the smaller communities. And that was another really great thing too, because that was at the spring. So coming into the summer, there was so many people just traveling in the north, doing canoe trips with their families and doing other things on the land that they normally wouldn't have done, and explore all of the beautiful places that we have up here. And so it was really nice to see so many families making camps and like being out on the land. And it was, yeah, so really thankful that I was able to have that time and share it.
I think this is like absolutely the perfect moment for us to watch a clip of Mila's film, but I also just want to invite viewers to add any questions or comments in the chat. We're more than happy to engage, even if it's just your feels or emojis. But yeah, let's watch a clip.
Hey, buddy.
I befriend you.
Yeah, she's coming to help me lift it up.
Can I help?
Yep, I'm just tightening. You tighten this side.
There's fleas everywhere.
Fly, yes.
Why?
Because it's neat. They like the smell of it.
Yeah, the upper body strength to tighten the moose hide, I'm just like, wow, goals on another level. But yeah. So I think at this point it would be pretty lovely to sort of shift from me asking you all one-on-one questions to a bit more of a roundtable between the four of us, if you don't mind, because there are so many themes in your work that flow through almost along to each other's pieces, but everyone's projects are so rooted in very distinct positionalities. And I really think there's something special that happens when something can be a uniquely personal story, or a story that you as the creator have been granted access to share or tell. But then this sort of universalizing thing happens too. And just on that last point, Mila, of you naming being acutely aware of people existing in the type of isolation in city centers, and how it's almost like letting viewers in to this part of your interiority is like not just a conscious thing, but it's like an act of care. I think there's just so much care in all of your works and in how you engage with the themes. I think it'd be really great to just have a bit of a discussion with you all on care. And this discussion, it could kind of go in a few different directions. Like if you all feel comfortable just sort of taking turns speaking, I don't mind kind of pointing to each of you or verbally or whatever. But also if someone says something that you want to build off of, I definitely encourage that as well. Or if there was something that you saw in the films of one of your peers and you felt like speaking to that, I think that could also be pretty special too.
Well, I can speak to that, Shimby, to start off, I think. I appreciate that question because I agree that it's a theme that I think is really prominent in all three of these films. And I know for myself, I mean, that's why I was in the place I was in when I made this film, was because I felt a need to kind of provide care for my dad, but also for myself in that time when things were so like uncertain, and I just really I didn't want to be alone in my apartment, you know, like Mila was speaking, I can totally relate to that as well. I knew, you know, I had friends in cities who were stuck in apartments, and I knew how incredibly lucky I was and fortunate to be able to go out and be outside at my farm and have all of that space. Like, what an immense privilege that was. And I knew that, and I felt that deep draw to that. You know, I didn't want to be in my apartment in town by myself. I wanted to know that I was in a place where I could feel cared for, you know, by my dad, by his company, but also by this place that is so comforting to me, and it's home in the deepest sense. And I feel safe there, and not just even safe, like safe from the virus, though that was part of it, but also safe, like emotionally. Like I can just be there and be cared for. Like the land itself is there for me. And also that notion too of caring for the land myself in the garden, and sort of taking care of that practice on the farm of growing that garden. It needs to be done, and it needs to be tended to and cared for. So for sure, that's a strong theme that runs throughout my film. And like I've mentioned many times, I can relate a lot to Mila's film just because, like, even when I first saw it, and we both made it ourselves, like we filmed it ourselves, it was done within sort of that space we were in at the time. So I could really see that shining through too in her care for, like it was, you could just see it like with her parents, with her kids, and the care even we just saw in the clip with the hide she was working on. I really feel a deep sense of that. And in Weiye's film, which in some ways is different from Mila's and mine, in that, you know, the family, they were stuck in quarantine. Like they had that experience of being kind of stuck when they first came back from Canada, and then coming back to Regina, and being, you know, away from their place of their home in China, but finding home where they were, and finding home in family, and that sense of care, and how we really can carry our safe places like with us no matter where we go. I think there's a really, like, to me, it was such a different experience from what I went through, but I felt a lot of strong emotions watching his film, in that sense of, and even the title itself, Weiye means home, right? Is that right? And like that to me is just, I've thought about that a lot, even when I first saw his film, and just thinking about this talk tonight of these interconnected threads, and how incredible it is that the NFB created, and I mean, they curated, which is actually a word for care as well, like this opportunity for these different perspectives of the early pandemic. And I think care is at the root of so much of it. Like, what do we care about? How did we care for ourselves and others in that time?
That point that you made about the titling of the film, I know we're talking a bit about care right now as per my earlier prompt, but it would be great to hear a bit more about how folks titled their work, because I think it ties in nicely to that discussion point around care as well.
I can go first since Jia was mentioned it. Yeah, so I think for my films, Jia is in Chinese basically mean home or family, and what I found in my own, when I'm making these stories, I mentioned earlier, it's about, finding the beauty of humanities, it really trying to, because when I at the time when we were making this story, there was a lot of negatives about Chinese people and about the COVID-19, all these relations. And it's really, and when I talked to John, the producer, I say, this is really a films that, I really want to share, not just about home and about family, but also, how we can, create a more secure, more safe place for everyone, not just for a group of people, or, we have done that in the past, moving forward, in the future, I think, I hope the stories, really help people to connect, the idea, finding the beauty of the humanity. And, really, I'm also seeing both Kristin and Melaw's films, especially Melaw's, connecting with the land, teaching your kids about all those, traditional crafting stuff. And also Kristin continuing, her grandparents' practice, and her mom's as well, and all these very interesting, ideas about, how can we, continue all of these traditions and all those, and moving forwards, and I think, somehow I think it ties our three of our films together, is that, yes, we have the past to remember and to learn, but also, we cannot let those, negativities, continue to spread around the world and attacking each other. So yeah, so I think that's why, for me, I'm Nemai for Jia, home and family, just remind everyone, even though our skin color could be different, we may not, blood related, but, still can be home, family, and make a home together. So yeah.
Mila or Kristin, it would be great to hear about the titles of your work, or Mila, it'd be great to hear. I know you both actually spoke a bit about care already, but I just feel like it's pretty vast terrain.
For care, like there was a lot of self-care was part of the reason to also go onto the land. I was had lost all of my work for, I don't know, till we can start traveling again freely, and I was trying not to be too depressed about that. I was trying to just be positive and try to be optimistic about things, and just rolling into other types of work, but also the uncertainty. So yeah, just I was consuming a lot of social media and news. There was just 24-hour news, and just trying to figure out what was going on. And so I just was just I need to, this is just a not a very good loop to be in, and just leaving my space to go and be completely disconnected. We had no cell phones or radio or anything out where we were on the land, and so being completely disconnected. We did have to come back into town for school and other work things once a week, and so just catching up on what was happening, just limiting the amount of stuff I was consuming was really incredible for my mental health, and just just grounding myself, and just really accepting and the situation like we're in globally, and then like just not having like a lot of my opportunities, the lost opportunities that I had, to bother me so much. And so I was just like totally rejuvenated from being on the land with my family at the time. And the name, so that's the self-care thing. The name of my film is Kita, which is amongst the birch, and where my dad went looking for a place to camp, and so he found this place, and it was in a stand of birch. So it's like a small stand of birch, and then there's like a stand of poplar trees and then spruce kind of above. But where we were just in a stand of birch trees. They were really tall, and the leaves budded while we were there. So like we went with the snow, and the snow melted, and then the leaves budded. So it was like so wonderful to be able to be there in just those 5 weeks, like a complete turn of the season. And so I'm actually going to go back out there in 2 weeks to shovel the snow and get it ready for my parents, so they don't have to do a whole lot of work to get their little spring camp going again. And so my dad named our camp Kita, and that's what I named the film.
I have a friend that lives in Tulita in the Northwest Territories, and the other day I was talking to him on the phone while he was going for a walk, and he was describing the birch trees around him, and I feel like, yeah, hearing descriptions and thinking about place is just so special, and the fact that you were able to sort of see the trees bud last year, and that you're planning on going back at this time, it's a pretty lovely continuum. I think there were so many unknowns, as we've all mentioned early on, and that may have been a big part of the context for when these works were made. But because we're still in this moment, the fact that there's room to revisit these themes or these places or relationships, it kind of does a whole other thing to time, which maybe it makes it a bit more manageable, or for all the uncertainties, there's something soothing about being able to return to places or relationships, I think. We do have a question from the audience, from John, which is, how did the people in your films respond to them?
My oldest son, Ahea, he's 15 now. He just put our short film on his resume because he's applying for a job for a production assistant, I think, in a small film being shot in Yellowknife. And so he's like, "What was that film that I was in?" And so, yeah, so he has he's putting that on his resume. So he was like, he's hoping to do work in film, not on any of my projects, but like on other people's projects, because he's a teenager. But he's he liked being a part of the project. My parents really liked it, and it just my home community is Fort Simpson. It's about 1,200 people. And they had a film festival last week. So my short film screened in my hometown, and I got a lot of really good feedback from my cousins, and my uncle called me. And so it was it was really sweet to have it screen in my hometown.
I can just echo to Melaw says. Now for Ryan, Jerry and Shiny's son, grow older and older, and he's able to watch the documentary and recognize himself and pointing at them, saying that's daddy and it's mommy and it's himself. So yeah, we was always joke about maybe one day he can be a actor too, or something, in film, and that can be something he can put on his resume. So but yeah, certainly, it is I think, for my family and communities here, friends as well, I think the reviews were positive as well, like it's really nice to be able to see someone they know on screen and be able to knowing that their stories that really help them to and motivate them to went through this pandemic, and knowing that that story can be able to share with more people, and especially along with so much amazing films, so yeah, so it's wonderful. Yeah, they're really happy about it, I think. Yeah.
Well, my dad, Ken, was quite happy to be in front of the camera. He's actually been in another NFB documentary, not one that I made, but anyway. So he was proud to have the farm kind of be in this film, and honestly, it was really special to work together on this film, even though I will fully admit, like, I could really be a tyrant sometimes in the early mornings when we shot, when we were having coffee outside and I was getting us all like mic'd up and stuff, and I was really not maybe the happiest director to be around, to be honest. But so my dad was really good to work with in that, he was my dad and he was patient and forgiving of me when I was getting stressed out about all the many different bits and pieces. But he was happy with the film overall. And honestly, I had a hard time at first. Like it wasn't natural for me to want to be in it. So that was kind of weird, but like I got over it. And also my sister and my niece, I was really proud to be able to share that moment with them and stuff. So it's really, you have a baby in the family and looking back on the film now, it's like, she was so little. Oh my God, so I can't wait till she is old enough to be able to look at that and see herself when she's just this little baby. And so, yeah, my family, it was a special thing to be able to share, like, capture this moment of spring coming in on the farm in this particular moment in time. And so, yeah, we were all pretty happy with how it turned out.
I'm curious about how all of you relate to the title of this artist talk, which is Safer Places, Story from the First Wave. And we, in our discussion, have meandered through topics such as emotional safety, caring for others, caring for ourselves. We've talked about implicitly caring for the land. We've situated all of ourselves and our relationship to the lands that either we're currently on and also where your films take place. But I would love to just take a moment to circle back to the title of this event, Safer Places, specifically that part, but also stories from the first wave.
I guess I'll speak to that. I sort of already, I think, spoke to this a little bit in terms of, for me, the farm is like the safest place for me in the world. But I realized that, it's personal for every person, but I also realized that, I am very privileged that I have that place to go to, and that not everyone has somewhere like that where they can go to feel safe. And so, and I was aware of that at the time as well, that I know that I'm incredibly fortunate to have this safer place to go to that for me did feel safer even than my already safe place, which was my apartment in a small town in Saskatchewan, you know? So I was already in terms of safety in this pandemic as safe as it gets, really. But the farm for me was safer, and that again, it was like emotionally safer for me when just the incredible uncertainty and how like life as I knew it, just we all knew it, just stopped suddenly one day, and everything. Yeah, work is totally different. You don't know what's going on globally, locally, the concerns, the fears, and that speaks to the second part of the title, which is the first wave. And I think, you know, we're a year into this now. And so, you know, our perspective on it has changed. And I think, again, I'm so grateful that the National Film Board sees this opportunity to, you know, quickly pivot and take all their budgets and all their plans for the year and just say, okay, we got to capture this, because this is whatever comes out of this. I mean, that moment when everything locked down, I mean, it was unprecedented in our lifetimes, right? And it's a historic moment. And I think that, at least I know I knew that was the case, sort of like, I think we all collectively knew, like, this is weird, like, this is something different. And so for the NFB to give filmmakers like the three of us here tonight and many dozens across the country the opportunity to capture what that was like in our particular places, and that moment of the first wave. And, you know, even just thinking about it a year ago of how much has changed and how much we didn't know then. And we didn't know maybe how hard it was going to be, but we also maybe, you know, it maybe didn't end up being quite as awful as maybe we were afraid of at the start. And for, at least in my perspective here where I am in my safer place. So yeah, I think that perspectives from the first wave, I think that these films collectively, The Curve that the NFB produced, are really an important, they're historical, they're a documentary record of this time. And so in that way, I think, you know, it's an interesting time right now, like pretty much exactly a year from when that first lockdown happened, to look back on that time and to be able to have these films to look back on it. Because as we live through our lives, our memories shape, our experiences shape our memories, so that we can't exactly remember how we felt, right? We remember how we felt through the lens of how we are, where we are now in time and space. And so to have these films to reference, I think is invaluable. So for me, I'm just really proud to be able to be part of that. And I'm just really grateful to the NFB for creating that opportunity for us as filmmakers in Canada. It's like, really, they did a great service to kind of the historical record of this country, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that was thanks, Kristin, for that. It was we had a conversation initially before about, and I never really looked back on and reflected about where I was while I was filming and afterwards, until we started talking about doing this panel. And it was yeah, really, like, historically being able to, like, this time and place, the time and place that we were in, and being able to have a record for it, for my children to remember that, to be able to have a story from, like, where I'm from in the north, to be a part of this. It's also, like, not just like why we went onto the land as well, is that I was working with a lot of elders to develop materials to help educate our Indigenous language speakers in the smaller communities of how to, like, follow the COVID restrictions and protocols, and washing your hands and staying 6 feet apart, and doing illustrations on those types of things. And so I was speaking with a lot of elders who are sharing that in the earlier pandemics, like in the 1920s and the late 1800s, people were told to go onto the land to go into their small family groups and go into the land and stay away from towns or the trading places. And so that was one of the things that I was talking to with my parents, and also was why we went onto the land. And so it was like, that was just oral history that I was told by an elder while I was in these meetings. And so that's what we did. And now it's a film. So it's just like, this is what we do when there's something like a catastrophe or something huge is happening. We go with our families, and we establish like a safe place on the land for us to be at. And so I was just thinking about how, like, historically this has been done, and how our stories are passed down, like from our oral history, and then now it's like in a film. So I was just really, I thought that was really interesting how I was able to capture that for this time that we're in, and reflecting on the first wave, and just how, and just kind of everywhere, and not knowing, just getting used to not knowing when it's going to end, I think. And then, like, we've been in this for so long, and now it's just like, okay, well, we're still here, and we still need to keep living like this. And eventually, with the vaccines rolling out, the Northwest Territories is doing really well, and just watching that happen throughout Canada and the world now. And like, we'll eventually get back to being normal, but it's like, I'm not like searching for like a date when it's going to end. I'm like, okay, we're in this, and then we're going to someday not be in it anymore. But I would just remember that time of just like, just accepting that we're in this pandemic for an uncertain amount of time.
I think one thing I really want to add to this, about this talk is like, we always I think for Chinese culture, or even for a lot of many different cultures, doesn't matter where they're from, we always focused on family, right? A lot of cultures, we talk about family and home, and especially for me, from what I learn and through this pandemic, is that made me truly understand that family is really where your home is at. Where they live, your families live at, is where's your home. So so when you understand that, you would be able to truly spend more time with your family. And I hope doesn't matter how long this pandemic gonna last, we will always know that the safest place for anyone we could have find should be a home. So that home doesn't like I say we could make it together. Doesn't matter what race you are or what language you speak before, together. Yeah, so that's what I meant. If we can all support each other, that will be make a wonderful home in Canada.
So a wave, like, there's something about this earlier moment, if we're to think about a wave metaphor and how water sort of surges and swells, maybe from relative stillness and then back again, or as a cycle that repeats itself. I'm thinking about how you all have named in different ways about how you've named these films as capturing this moment in pretty unique ways. And of course, the foresight, or even the testament of there being an expansive project like this that the NFB funded and put together. I'm also thinking about what comes before the wave, and what might come after or in between sets of waves. And when thinking about time in this national context, I'm thinking about some of the protests that were happening, the blockades, the Wet'suwet'en solidarity movements that were really rocking this place before the pandemic hit as hard as it did. And I'm thinking about how when COVID-19 was very much established and rooted here, other systemic inequalities that also were almost newly considered by some as pandemics, and the resurgence of things like the Black Lives Matter movements. So I would sort of love to hear, in whatever ways you feel like speaking to the point of broader contexts, not just about the pandemic and the first wave, but also these broader moments that are part and parcel of what we're navigating, or things that are on our minds that at the time of filming would have been very present, but because the subject matter is stories uniquely told by the three of you as filmmakers, maybe the presence of those movements or moments exist as context, but not necessarily subject matter, if that makes sense. Yeah, it would be great to kind of hear a bit about your thoughts on those broader contexts that were and are very much still happening.
I think, it's certainly it's really interesting questions. But for myself, one thing I like to be a documentary director is to be able to, tell stories that really matter, to the society, not just to certain individuals and a group of people. So in that matter, I think, that's kind of like the responsibility as a storytellers, I think, for everyone. So it's my cat, I have to let her go. So I think, we have to really ask ourselves, doesn't matter what happened and when it happened, for what the matters, you have to ask ourselves what truly mattered to us, what did you want to contribute to make this world better, not make it more evil, So yeah, I hope people, from seeing this documentary, and hopefully, in my future works, and from other documentary as well as filmmakers' works, we all understand, we could try to make this world better than make it, more evil. So, yeah.
Oh, you go ahead, Mila. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm thinking about that question. I have to say, again, looking back on time, and another project I worked on this summer about documenting the pandemic, and how, as you're saying, a lot of these social movements really, I guess if we're going with that wave metaphor, sort of really the wave really kind of crashed ashore during the summer. And at the time that I was filming this, it wasn't something like these social movements maybe weren't something that was at the forefront of my mind, like these contemporary movements. But I do remember very clearly at the time that I was at the farm doing this film, I was reading a book for my day job with a heritage organization doing a lot of reading about reconciliation, and I was reading in particular the book Clearing the Plains by James Dashuk. And a large part of that book is about the many epidemics that swept through the plains starting in the 18th century and up to the present day. And the incredible mortality and morbidity rates of different various smallpox, tuberculosis, and how those effects are still being lived in Indigenous communities on the plains today. And it was a very sobering read, and it was it was a book I started reading before the pandemic really took hold, and of course it was really kind of eye-opening to look at those incredibly high statistics, and of course to think about the book is really about how disease really cleared the way for settlement on the prairies, and how can you not, as I'm sitting there on a farm, in Treaty 4 territory, how could I not? Of course, I was thinking about the implications of that. And it was a very, as I said, sobering experience thinking about that and thinking about how history has shaped this land that we're all living on, and how it relates to me specifically in the context of my family and my own journey towards reconciliation and my own understanding of the essential nature of these protests and these social movements and the work that I do and how I place myself in that. And yeah, so it's a very deep question, Shimby, and it's honestly a little difficult to answer because there's so much embedded within that, and it's an ongoing work that we're all doing as Canadians. Like we're going through, I think globally we're going through a reckoning. We're undoing, we're overturning history, we're examining it, we're overturning colonialism. We're dealing with the aftermath of these really oppressive structures that are still sort of firmly rooted in our institutions. And so it's something that, in my own film, I don't think it's necessarily something that comes out in my film, but certainly it was something that was informing my thoughts about where I was in time and place. And yet that's where I was, and that's where I am, was, on my family's farm, putting in my garden. And that's where I come from. And knowing that it is part of a much larger and darker kind of story, and yet that's where I am, that's where we are, and how do we find our way forward from that in a good way?
Thinking of everything that's happened this year and the work that I did at the time that I was filming. Well, like I do a lot of moose high tanning. I teach high tanning. I travel to Indigenous communities across Canada, and I help fill in the gaps. So I heal those intergenerational missing gaps of knowledge because of colonialism and residential school. And so like just the act of tanning hides is inherently like it's a form of resistance. Also, like any type of land-based practice, you're in your traditional territory, you're on the land, so you're asserting your Indigenous rights. And I always, like when I was like a baby moose hide tanner, like over 10 years ago, just learning the practice, and I was just kind of like a little bit more like a little more radical about it. I'd be like, this is how I'm protecting the land, and if I'm on my land, like industry can't come in because I'm using the land, and like people can't come and take what you're using. And that was part of the whole, like Kristin was saying, clearing the plains is just removing us from our land, disconnecting us from our land and our way of lives and our traditional practices, so that they could just go and take the land. And so if we're revitalizing these land-based practices, we're using our traditional lands, we're occupying it. It's a part of our culture. It's a part of our living culture still. And so there's always, like, whenever I do high tanning, so I was high tanning at Kita, there's a little bit of that, like that act of like reclaiming and being connected with the land. And I also do a lot of, because of the pandemic and being not being able to travel or see any of my students or the participants in my camps, I was doing a lot of support online through social media. And so I'd like post videos of me like sharpening a tool or cleaning a hide or something. And then people will ask me questions, and I'll just kind of try to walk them through as best as I can over social media. And so it's really beautiful to see a lot of young high tanners start up. And one of my previous students was in Digby during the lobster incidents that were happening with the Mi'kmaq on the East Coast. And so just trying to find ways to support remotely in the Northwest Territories, a lot of that was happening around the world. A few of my friends, Indigenous artists, we started a Facebook auction group called Indigenous Artists. First, it was Indigenous Artists for Black Lives in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. So we did auctions for like earrings and stuff to support bail funds and community organizations that really needed it. And then with when Digby happened, we were in support of the Mi'kmaq, and then the Inuit up in Baker Lake. I think they're trying to stop the iron ore mining that is really kind of like polluting a lot of like the shores and a lot of the area that it's in. So we've switched the auction site up to do that. And so it's a lot of like mutual aid, crowdfunding things that we're able to do in our remotely from up here for the larger community.
There's this really special point that you both just touched upon in very different ways, and it's a point of solidarity. There's so many ways to go about that work, whether it's organizing broader public campaigns or really doing that internal work to examine our own life circumstances and what that's rooted in, or potentially at whose expense. And I think for this last little section of our conversation, it would be so good to hear you all just mention a few words about that concept of solidarity, both in your films and in your broader practices, because it's so clear how to live in this moment in a way that enables not just surviving, but any type of care or growth or family or living on and maintaining and engaging with the land, or emotional safety, or all these themes that have come up in our discussion. There are ways that we necessarily have to interrelate beyond our own small bubbles, and the work that all of your films do in that is just so profound, the solidarity work of your films. So it would be great to hear, building on Mila, your point just now, it'd be great to hear you all speak to that a little bit. And then I think at that time, it'll be a moment for us to all say goodbye.
I can go first. I think to echo to what you all say, I think, what's really important about staying solidarity is about staying true to yourself and finding your true spirit, and understand why and what made of who you are. And, while we're growing up at this place, I mean, this moment, we're still living. And I guess we just need to figure out why. Yeah, that's it,
Thanks, Weiye. That was a great comment, staying true to yourself. And yeah, I think for sure that's certainly all three of our films tonight. And that was definitely what I was thinking of in this film. I mean, it's so personal, and it's really so specifically about my family. And yet, when I was making it, I was thinking about just, how that's how the world works is, all these families out there, all these individuals who are just doing their thing and quietly often, and what is the thing that they're doing. And in my context, it's, all the women in my family going back, innumerable generations who fed their families, and who grew the food to feed their families. And in that context, I mean, I was speaking to that female element on my farm, and how, the women have always done that work of making sure their families are fed. And so in that way, there's a solidarity with my female ancestors, and also with just all the people, and not just women, all the people in the world now who are doing that work of feeding their families, however they do that, whether it's through gardening or hunting, or even going to the food bank, or going out and working and going to the grocery store and bringing food home for their families, and how that's the most essential work that we all do. And so in that way, I think that's how my film speaks to that sense of solidarity.
How my film speaks to solidarity. Being able to share my experience, or bringing people into this safe space that created with my family, and sharing the teachings. And I know there's so many other families in the North that do this type of go out on the land, and really practice a lot of our traditional way of life. And Kristin was saying, are not doing this because it's their normal life. They're not posting it on social media or whatever. This is just the way they live. And being able to just have a window to that, and sharing the knowledge that I have in a way for my children to continue to do this type of to be on the land this way, them growing their skills and their confidence on the land. And being able to as an example that people are capable of returning to the land in different ways. One of the other projects I was just remembering that I was doing while we were at camp is I was sewing. I was beading a beaded mask. We did a mask project. One of my friends, Tanya Larson, organized a solidarity art project that we would do bead masks with some of our Asian friends that are makers and artists, because there was at the first wave, there was a lot of violence against our Asian communities. And there was also a lot of violence against our Indigenous communities, and she was just trying to find a way for us to be able to have a conversation and come together. And so her idea was that we would create these masks and work together and learn about what's happening in each other's communities, and support each other through our friendships and through social media and at distance. And it was a she had asked me to be a part of it, and I was beading this mask the whole time that I was at the camp. And my project partner, her name is Stephanie. She's Cambodian in Seattle, and she does a lot of community work in Seattle. And so we talked about our designs, and I learned about like her family and like what she's doing in her community, and I was sharing what I was doing with my family and my kids, and it was just this completely beautiful idea, and I'm so happy that she asked me to be a part of it. But it was just like bringing our communities together to create these masks that talk about what's happening in our communities, and being able to share that with somebody, and feeling supported by her, and I'm finding ways to be able to support her in her community. That was one of the art projects that I was doing as well, that I was there. So
it's so lovely to think about the behind the scenes of all of your works, and it's really special to have a bit of that insight into a very physical and material form of solidarity that existed during the making of that film. I think this is the time where we say a couple of thank yous and close this little moment that we had the pleasure and privilege of sharing. I'm so grateful. All of your works are really profound, and it's been a privilege and pleasure to watch them. I'm so happy and thankful for the NFB for making them publicly available. And for folks of you who are tuning in either live or at a later moment, you're able to watch the films online, as we've mentioned a few times. And it's been a moment. It's been a moment with you all. So big thanks for all of you for being here, and also to your extended networks that created the space for your existence and the projects that you've made for their existence too. And I especially would like to thank Sarah from the RPL for all of your behind the scenes work. And I'd like to also just have this moment to say that this doesn't have to be the last moment, you know? We'll continue, we'll remember this little live broadcast will end, but this connection will endure in many different ways. So whether we get the chance to say hello in person at some point, or if this is the moment in time that we meet, it's been pretty special to feel like our lives have been impacted by each other in this way. So I want to thank you all for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Shimby.
Yeah.
Shimby, your questions are so amazing. It was so nice to be in conversation with you all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for tuning in as well.
Yes, thank you.
Bye all of you.
Right, we're all done. Okay. Have a great night.